everyone, and welcome to Memory Matters for All Ages. I'm Janelle Nichols of the Gables of Hudson Assisted Living Residence. We want to welcome back to the program Catherine Kilpatrick. She is a speech-language pathologist with over 40 years of experience, a national speaker, an author of over 30 publications, and she has helped innumerable people with diagnosis of dementia. She also has a real heart for the caregivers and for the families. And as we usually do here at Memory Matters, we spend the third week of each month talking about dementia.
Right.
Kathy, welcome back to the program.
Hi, Janelle.
I had a while back when we were talking about this program today and what we were going to share, I remembered something that happened many years ago at an assisted living where I was working at the time. And that is a gentleman that had dementia asking me the same question over and over. And I mean like every minute. Mm-hmm. Now, even the best of us, and I held it together, but I will admit I was at the end of my rope. And I answered, and I wrote it down on a piece of paper, and I tried to explain, and I tried different ways of explaining. It was really tough. And that's what we're going to talk about today, is helping people with props. And I mean, situations like that can get to the best of us, can't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mentioned a while ago that I was traveling after 9/11, that Thanksgiving, and there was a woman in the airport who was confused, and she kept telling the same story over and over again. And so one of the things that can be helpful is, you know, like you said, writing it down and things like that, but it's hard if you're kind of like on the fly as opposed to sitting in the same room for a while. So I kept diverting her with questions. So I'd say, well, tell me about your sister, or tell me about where you grew up. And what would happen is we'd have a neat conversation, and then we'd end up back.
And she'd go back. That's the same thing that happened with this gentleman. I tried to redirect, and nothing could get him off of that item that he was worried about.
And interesting, I talked to a friend recently whose dad is starting to have some decline physically. And I said, well, does he have some dementia because of some of the other things she was saying? She says, oh, maybe a little bit. He says the same thing over and over and over again. When you get to that stage, we're not talking mild cognitive impairment. We're talking more serious decline. And so people don't often interpret that as that. So, yeah, definitely.
Exactly. All right, I bet you see a lot of different personalities and a lot of different situations.
It's fun. It's not boring.
No, it's not. It's not. And you especially, one thing I so much appreciate about you is that you look at everyone as an individual. I've never seen you put people into a little box that you make them fit into. Can you give us some things to think about? Like you just talked about this family member that obviously did not understand where they were with this loved one. Can you give us some things to think about?
Well, and just to tag on to that for a second, it is what it is, okay? But here's the thing. When you're trying to reason with that person to make decisions about end-of-life things, they may not be able to handle, well, you got this option or that option or this option. So it's, you know, the repetitive questioning can be annoying, but then you got to start looking at the other things depending, you know, this person's health is failing. It could be someone else that still lives alone. And it's like, okay, we need to do other things. So, you know, you're right in terms of the different props. And last week we talked about mild cognitive impairment and maybe setting up some basic things. And so what we need to do as one progresses with their dementia or Alzheimer's disease, and again, Alzheimer's being one of the areas, you know, when we think of dementia, Alzheimer's can be one of the causes. It could be a traumatic brain injury, it could be vascular dementia. What I like to focus in on is, you know, new learning becomes a little bit harder. So how did they keep track of information before? So, you know, most of my friends who are on electronic devices use that as their calendar. I don't, because I'm on the road. And I don't want to be looking at that. So I'm on paper. It's not on an electronic mode. But we need to find out, you know, maybe they had a day planner before. Maybe they, you know, did Post-it notes or whatever. But the other thing is, as I continue in my profession in the next decade, I'm going to be dealing with a lot more people who do electronics, and then how do we make that easier for them? Because what happens when the vision problems start kicking in, or the hearing problems, or something like that, so they don't hear the notice, the text message thing, or, whatever. As the dementia advances, the advantage of getting a speech-language pathologist involved, and I'm kind of prejudiced, but this is our expertise. Sure. If that person does not hear well, or their vision is impaired, or perhaps they had a stroke and they have some right neglect or left neglect, so they're not scanning the information. So here you've got written reminders, and we all do it. I've done it. I've seen myself do it in therapy, where I kind of scribble something down. In other words, I'm not paying attention to the fact that I'm printing and it's very legible. So families might say, well, I write stuff down, but they don't follow it. Well, you got to check to make sure that they can see it, read it, and that it's not too complicated. So it's some basic kinds of things. And then often what they did, we just need some simplification, for the information that's on there. And so whether it's appointments or the medication or any of that. And someone might be in the earlier stages of Alzheimer's disease and dementia, or they may have progressed to another level where they need 24/7 supervision. That doesn't mean that you can't create some of these props for them so they know what's going on and they feel like it's part of their life. And I think, that to me is quality of life, and that's what we're looking for.
So if I understand correctly, you are advocating an individual assessment, so to speak, of that person, right, how they used to work. For example, me, I didn't use electronics.
Right.
So I would want a calendar, something in print. Right. An individual assessment of how that person has worked and organized their life in the past, and then see how you can tweak that.
Absolutely.
Right? Well, I know last week you did talk about the memory board, which is a simple but very resourceful way to help someone like this. Do you have some other specific tips that you can give us?
And this is one of the biggest ones that I see, and the complaint I'll get, I'll call Mom and she doesn't remember that I was there. And this may be someone in independent or assisted living, and they were there and took her out for ice cream or, whatever. And it's very upsetting because I was there. So there's a couple of different things you can do. And again, this is individualized, because what may work for one person may be absolutely stressful for the other. But it could be taken like as simple as a stenographer's pad, spiral notebook somehow, put the date at the top, and then write down what went on for that day. So you go and visit, so you write down what time you were there and what you did and some of the things you talked about. So when another family member or friend comes in, either the next day or later, they can refer to that and say, oh, I see Janelle was there and you guys played poker for 2 hours and then you went and ordered a pizza.
That is a great idea,
I bet
Kathy.
you've seen that a lot.
I see it a lot, and what I see is the resident complaining that their family member never comes and that their daughter never comes, and she will have just left, or she is the daughter that comes every day. So I love that idea. That's so simple, and it's a great idea.
It just works out so well. And the thing is, you might bring in take pictures on your phone and then print some off and then can stick them in there. Then it becomes a diary. So when they're calling a family member or someone else is coming and visit, they can go through. And it's teaching the family and the friends and the caregivers. I usually try and find one key person who seems to be on top of the whole situation and have them call other people. So let's say I'm calling my mom in Massachusetts. Hey, Mom, what'd you do today? And she would say, oh, same old, same old. And I'll say, go pick up your book and go look up the stuff for the week and tell me about it. And then they feel a little bit sharper with that. And it's all about, my company's called Communication Connection. It's about staying connected.
Right.
And even if you can't hear well, see well, whatever, how do we stay connected, with that? So the other thing that I suggest is a memory book. And it can be a notebook, 3-ring binder, and have sections in it. And I can remember doing some talks down in Canton at a place where the woman brought hers in after we did like the 3rd memory group. And what she did is she had like what's stored in the attic, and there was a list of all that. All the pertinent information of family members and phone numbers, people that she donated money to, and she had sections for all of that. And evidently this was a pretty organized person before who was able to create that. But if you had one for mom or dad or a friend, then you could have them look at it, because they go to the doctor and they can't remember information, but it could be written down, because often to the middle stages they can read out loud. So they could read what you guys have written down, saying, okay, you know, I had some back pain last week, this medication's giving me a headache, rather than that person sitting there while the doc and the family member are talking back and forth. It's a dignity thing. And then another tip, which is great in the car, where are we going, what time are we going to get there? You get a super sticky Post-it note, I wish I'd invented them, and stick it on the dashboard, and when they ask you, where are we going, or what's the doctor's name, you just keep pointing to it, and eventually they're going to be looking at that, and they'll know the information.
Those are so practical. I just love them, Kathy, and that's, as I've said before, that's one of my favorite things about you when you speak, is that you give people something practical that they can actually put into practice. The other point I wanted to comment on that you made is that these practices and these tips can be used pretty far into the disease process.
But they often need to be altered a bit.
Sure.
So in other words, they may be doing fine with it. And tweaked. I like
tweak it a little bit.
Not that other word.
Yes, right.
But it may be that they need larger print, or they need only the day of the week on it. But what happens for all of us is we kind of just do what we always did. So
Sure. So families need to be aware of the progression and tweak things a little bit and be observant and very practical. All right, Kathy, what do you suggest for us to do this week? And we have family members that are, this has struck a chord with them as they watch the program today. What tips do you have for them this week?
Okay. I think the most important thing is observe. Notice what's going on. Again, this is only a 15-minute program. My website is meant to be the book that I didn't write. All my products are things to do when you visit.
Sure.
And I have stuff on every single one of these labeled, you know, so that you can just click on them and get more information. Become more informed. If you know someone that's having some difficulties with a loved one, you know, share the resource with them, because that's one of my goals, and that's one of the reasons we did this program.
That's why we do what we do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. All right, very good. I did want to point out something Kathy just mentioned. Please stay tuned at the end of the broadcast. We do have Kathy's website there. She also writes a blog in conjunction with what we talk about each week. There is so much information on both of those. I would encourage you to watch at the end of the program, get those addresses, and go and get the further information. Like Kathy said, that's another book. She's written over 30 publications, but there's another book right there at your fingertips.
Someday I'm going to put it in something.
Someday. Well, Kathy, again, thank you so much for such practical information. I love it. And I also love your quote that you always give us at the end of the program.
Well,
what do you have for
Janelle.
us today?
And just a side comment, Janelle and I have been working together for a long time, and we problem solve on a lot of different scenarios. Her talents are beyond amazing, and
thank you.
We've been doing this since 2005, and it's just such a good combo. So I feel honored to have you as part of this.
Thank you,
Okay.
Kathy.
So here's the quote, because we're walking a journey with someone. I walked it with my mom, and I feel this from the bottom of my heart. Your presence is the most precious gift that you can give to another human being. And if we can learn to meet them where they're at, this is my quote, it makes a huge difference. And that quote was by Marshall Rosenberg. So thank you.
Wow, I should have read that quote before. That brought tears to my eyes. Kathy, that was beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us, and please join us next week. And now go and make it a great day.